Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Wyant, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Applied Software Greatech Group. You're invited to join our conversation to model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation adventure of this great industry. We recorded this conversation live at the Advancing Preconstruction show in Denver with Will Lehrmann, VP of Product at Procore. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much for taking the time to come chat with us today. We're at Advancing Precon here. What brings you to the show this year?
Yeah, so I'm the VP of Product for Procore, leading our pre-construction teams. And so this is the Super Bowl for pre-construction technology and innovation. So that's what brings me here.
Yeah, nice. Any big kind of standout moments so far here? We're day one of the official conference, but any big moments or takeaways so far?
Yeah, I mean, because of what I do, I always get excited about all the technology players. And so it's really interesting to see how the technology is evolving, even year to year, to keep pace with the changes in construction. And, being in the technology construction industry for the past 10 years, there's been so much innovation to support the industry, which has been awesome because, construction's been relatively underserved for a really long time. And I think pre-construction was actually lagging a little bit behind when it came to technology innovation, yet it's one of the, if not the most complex part of construction. It carries so much of the project risk. It's really, really intricate and difficult. And so I'm just happy to see, technology starting to meet the industry where it's needed and start to help, pre-construction teams execute their job better. So that's what I get, really excited about. And then, being able to sit in a room and listen to experts who have been doing this, share their challenges, share opportunities, share win stories. You just always love that, because anytime you can get folks together in the same industry who theoretically are competitors out in the construction market, but actually coming together to say, hey, there's got to be a better way. How can we, provide better results for the industry, better environments for our teams. I just love that. I always get excited about conferences like this. So this is the big one for pre-construction, and that's what stands out.
Yeah, nice. Why do you think Precon has been slower? Is not necessarily the right word, but I can't think of a better word right now. So slower in bringing in the tech into the space.
Gosh, it's a really good question that I probably don't have a precise answer for, but I have some, hypotheses about why. And I think part of it is that you end up associating the actual profit and revenue from a construction project during project execution, right? We're out there actually doing the work, fulfilling the contract, payments are happening. And so it's a little bit easier to associate technology spend with some of the real actual revenue dollars that are coming in. And so I think as a result, it was a little bit easier for folks to spend money on project execution tools. But when in reality, again, so much of the risk that you actually can mitigate on a project is happening in pre-construction. And then I'd say the other big trend, which, I'm sure we'll chat about a little bit, is that it's been, steady, and it hasn't happened overnight, but it's been really, really consistent, this move towards more integrated project delivery. And I think as that's happened, what it's done is it's put a lot more iteration within the pre-construction phase, which puts a lot of pressure on some of the ways that these teams were working, and frankly asking a lot more of pre-construction teams, and the tools that were there before just aren't satisfactory to actually deliver what they need. Then you're also seeing this blending of project execution operations teams and pre-construction, because it's not uncommon now for folks to be out in the field building a project while certain aspects of pre-construction are still happening. And so, for the first time, you're starting to see this bleeding over of the roles and the teams. And as a result, they're all looking for for better technology and better ways to support those needs. And so I think as that started to happen, you start to see the bleed over of technology innovators coming in and saying, wait, what are these pre-con teams? We could help them too. And so I don't know, that's some of my ideas, but frankly, it's a little perplexing why such an important, complex, and critical part of construction has been more underserved than some of the other aspects of construction. But anyways.
Yeah, so I want to pick up on one of the things that you brought up there around risk. How do you identify and then mitigate risk during the pre-con phase, and what's kind of the emerging tech's role in helping this?
Yeah, well, some of it's pretty straightforward, which is 95% of the design decisions are happening in pre-construction, or that bleeding over period between pre-construction and project execution. So many cost decisions and assumptions are happening in pre-construction, and when you're talking about an industry where folks are dealing with 3, 5, 10% margins, the room for error is pretty minimal, and so there is so much that gets decided, iterated on, from design to cost prediction in pre-construction. And so at the end of the day, if you can become more accurate there, now you can start to deal with some of the craziness that happens on an actual construction project, where we started digging underground and we found something we didn't expect. Okay, well, now we got to mitigate for that. And so you are inevitably going to come across a bunch of challenges and gotchas during construction. And I think the more accuracy and predictability that you can put into pre-construction, the more you can actually absorb those issues and unforeseen, but pretty likely issues that are going to happen during project execution. And so, that's the risk side of it. And so, one of the emerging trends that I get really excited about is, well, how can we take all of that data from project execution? So not what happens in pre-construction, but what happens after pre-construction, and say, hey, now that we know with more certainty what actually happens down the road, what types of issues we typically run into, how frequently those issues start to happen, how out of sync, particular cost estimates that we have are with what the actual cost ends up being at the end of a job, which vendors, or trade partners that we work with are really good at certain types of work, and maybe we don't have so much success on other types of jobs. If we can take all that data and give it to pre-construction teams, they can start to build some of that contingency into their pre-construction plan. And so rather than just going, well, here's what we estimated on our last 10 jobs like this, they can say, here's what we estimated on our last 10 jobs like this, but then here's what actually happened on those jobs. And so, a lot of it goes back to data. And when you talk about something like historical data, which has been around in pre-construction and construction for a long time, one is the tools and the accessibility of that data is getting better, but then also the marriage of project execution operations data and pre-construction data coming together, I think that's going to be really transformative for the industry. Part of the challenge, though, is that data is often really siloed. Or, construction companies haven't actually sat down as an entire organization, not as a siloed pre-con team and operations team, and sat down and said, here's how we think about our data, here's how we structure it, so that when the project's over, we can actually look back and have a full 360-degree view of that project life cycle and actually learn from it. And so, I can hit you with the AI buzzwords, but really at the end of the day, it's just our ability to more quickly pull insights out of our data. But I still think there's a challenge of, well, how do we actually make sure we're collecting all of the right data, and then we're putting it into the hands of the teams that can actually leverage it early on in the project, which is pre-construction. So I just think the more we can arm those teams with good data, the better off they're going to be. And I think that's something that's going to be really transformative for the industry, and already starting to show some signs of.
Yeah, for me, it comes back to kind of big C buzzwords: collaboration and communication. That you got to get everybody, all the key stakeholders in the room early in the process, have them agree on what the process is going to be, how they're going to report, what the data structure is going to be, how all that's going to look, and kind of flow between all the different silos that do exist, and the point solutions, and all the complexities that are on a project. Get them to talk about it.
Yes.
On the same page early.
Totally. And I'm glad you brought that up, because some of it's not even about the data. Some of it's about the collaborative processes within construction. And what I love about integrated project delivery, design, build, there's a whole continuum of different language you can use for those types of projects. And what's so great about them is it's pulling all the risk together into more stakeholders on the project. It's sharing that risk together, and it's unlocking way more opportunities for collaboration around the design, around the cost, and allowing everyone to be more flexible to deliver a positive project outcome. That's all good. Mm-hmm. The problem is that the technology that was developed to support construction was designed to support an old process, a design, bid, build process, where that collaboration wasn't even happening. And so now that we're actually seeing the construction industry, sans technology, innovate, improve, and get better about how they work collaboratively, well, okay, tech companies, like, figure it out. Now you need to make sure that your technology is actually meeting the market where it is, and giving them that collaborative opportunity where, I should be able to have a design model and perform a takeoff on the same design model that my teams are doing design reviews on and doing coordination issue management on. And I shouldn't be managing those out of 3 different systems, because at the end of the day, all those conversations around cost, design changes, issues, coordination, it's all part of the same conversation. And those are all now trade-offs and collaborations that these stakeholders are doing together to make the right decisions collectively for a successful project that's going to hit the budget that everyone's happy with, that's going to hit the timeline folks are happy with, and deliver the product ultimately that folks are happy with. And so, they now need the technology and the tools to actually behave the way that the industry's actually trying to operate, rather than work around the system. So yeah, I think the when you actually poke into the collaborative buzzword, there's so much more to it, which is, it's a new way of working, and it's literally new processes and new opportunities. And I think it's all incredible for the industry. And, there's just so much more success there for all parties, and it's not as litigious, it's not as contentious. And folks are actually trying to deliver success together, which is awesome. And, now we just got to make sure they have the right tools to do it.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely been a shift in mindset, I think, in the construction industry, especially over the last 5 years. I think, when COVID happened, it kind of was a wake-up call to a lot of construction firms of oh, hey, we have to embrace tech in a whole different way and rethink all of our processes, and kind of led to this tech boom that's happening here in construction.
Yeah, and you think about communication too, right? Where the norm was this delayed communication flow, right? Well, we have a question or a decision, and it's going to go through this slow process to actually, round trip back to people being able to make a decision on it. And I think, we've been thrust into a world outside of construction and in construction where communication is just so much easier. You've got Teams and Slack, and you can pick up the phone, you can text. I mean, there's so many ways that folks can communicate faster, and all that same technology, can and does exist within construction tech as well. And so I think folks are starting to go, well, hold on. There might be a quicker way. Why can't I get an answer in 30 seconds? Why do I need to wait for a 1 week turnaround time? Right. I think some of that's, again, the change in moving to more, integrated project delivery models. But I also think it's just the fact that we're all looking around going, it's really easy to communicate these days. Why can't we do that in construction? And why can't we reduce the timeline to make decisions, to ask questions, to get information? And when you can reduce all that timeline, it's it's just going to allow you to have more time to deliver the project successfully. It's going to reduce that stress on everybody to be trying to meet deadlines. And what I get really passionate about is when you start to enable projects to be more predictable, to be on schedule. When you follow that train of thought all the way to what the actual negative impact is, it's safety. Because when folks are behind schedule, it leads to rework. And we know for a fact that rework leads to more safety incidents on the job site. And so what I get really passionate about is, well, how can we make projects more predictable, remove some of those risks earlier on in pre-construction, so that when folks actually get out into the field, they're not scrambling, they're not racing to hit a deadline that, frankly, shouldn't have been so tight to begin with, so that at the end of the day, they can get home safe. And that direct relationship between folks being behind schedule, folks making, design, catching design issues too late where they have to do rework, that all leads back to safety incidents. And, that's devastating. And so I'm glad to see us improving that, and I think there's a long way to go. And at the end of the day, if we can get beyond somebody made a little bit more profit, or somebody was a little bit happier, to actually saving people's lives and improving people's lives, I mean that's why I get up every morning and work on this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, especially here in construction with safety being off the charts and in a not good way.
Yeah,
I think it's a real issue that we have to keep at the forefront for
yeah.
sure. So kind of shifting on the technology side, what are some of the emerging trends coming into, especially in pre-con, that people should stop and take note of?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to just hit on all the buzzwords, but it's the data. It just is. Mm-hmm. Construction is sitting on an absolute mountain of data. And now we're seeing with AI and machine learning and big data management and analytics tools, the solutions to digest data and provide really, really powerful and useful insights, it's there. It exists. And gosh, I can't think of an industry that's sitting on more data than construction. It might be out there, but I'm just so deep in construction, that's all I think about every day. But it is outrageous how much data gets produced every single day just for a single construction project, let alone for the entire industry. And when I talk to really, really well-run billion-dollar construction companies who have awesome, innovative teams, and I'll talk to their CIOs, and they're like, we are scratching the surface. We are probably tapping into 5-10% of our data. Mm-hmm. Help us. We need to figure out how to get more of it, because there's so much to learn. There's so many opportunities to find the risk and catch it earlier, to figure out what types of projects your company's really good at, not good at, so that you can make better decisions about which projects you pursue, which markets you go into. And it even goes back to things like safety. You can start to say, well, hold on. Let's actually look at our data and figure out why we're producing so many RFIs or change orders, or why we're producing so many design changes, way too late, why we're having so much rework, and then actually backtrack that to figure out, well, what can we do earlier in the project to mitigate that, and produce safer outcomes. And so probably something you hear a lot when folks talk about, what's the emerging trends and in the industry. And I just really think it's folks starting to come around and say, we got to do something with this data because we're sitting on it and there's value in it. Mm-hmm. Technology companies are doing the same thing. Construction companies are doing the same thing. There's probably no industry, in the world that isn't starting to wake up to the fact that the tools, the capabilities are out there to better leverage it. And I think construction's no different. Yeah.
So how do you encourage construction companies to take the time to really be strategic about how they're thinking and viewing and analyzing their data?
Yeah. So a big one is, okay, I'll give you two quick answers. So one is you don't start with the data, right? You start with the questions you want to ask or answer. So, right. Hey, where do we have a bunch of risk in our business? Where do we see, poor outcomes for our business? And say, okay, we want to improve that, right? So you start with what the problem is, you start with what some opportunity is, you start with which questions you have been unable to answer as a company with any sort of precision, and then you work your way back and you start to go, okay, well, if that's the question I have, what would inform that? And so I think one of the first things construction companies should be doing is starting to say, well, what are the 10 most important questions that we should be asking ourselves that we can't answer today, other than anecdotally, right? And what's so cool about construction is there's so much knowledge, just historical, anecdotal knowledge. People are so good at this craft, and they've actually done an incredible job just off gut and history and I've done this a lot of times, so I know. And they're probably right like 70% of the time, but how do we get that to 90% of the time, 95% of the time? And I really think it goes back to really thinking about what are those questions that you want to ask yourself as a business and you really need answers to. And then you work back from that to, okay, well, what data do we either already have and now need to figure out how to organize, or what data do we need to start collecting that maybe we haven't been collecting to actually answer those questions. And the other one is you got to think about your data structure, and regardless of what tool you use, if your pre-construction team and your operations teams have totally different structures of how they think about cost data, for instance, well, it's going to be really, really hard to pull insights out of that down the road, right? There are ways to do it, but it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of manipulation of the data to actually get to that. And so I think part of it too is also having a data strategy. Again, sans any particular technology vendor saying, okay, here's how we structure our cost data. Here's how we structure our RFI data, and actually going through that process. And at the end of it, you now know how you want to capture that information so that it's way easier to extract, insights later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a couple things. There's a lot of really great nuggets there. First, I love that you said start with the questions instead of just looking at the data, because I see people go wrong with that all the time, because data can tell you anything that you want if you start there instead of the questions and then work backwards. And then, you brought up that construction have been right, 70% just on gut. I think it's going to become really important on how do we take that knowledge and bring it into the technology as well too. Obviously, another big buzzword here, but we have the labor shortage, and we need to become more efficient using technology. And really, there's so much wisdom in the construction industry already. How can we just tap into a little bit of that and kind of crowdsource that in the technology? I think is going to be a really important over the next decade.
I agree. There are some interesting technology and AI opportunities around how you can, produce best practices for folks, new employees, first-time users, and kind of, in context in real time, help put information in front of them. But if I actually zoom out of some of the techier answers, part of it is actually creating some standardization and some best practices as a company. Because what's happened is a lot of companies have relied on, well, I have these 10 divisions, and I got a 25-year experienced person running each one of those divisions. So I'm good. But when you actually go talk to each one of those divisions, they all run their processes slightly differently.
Right.
But why mess with a good thing, right? Every one of those divisions is doing a great job. They're producing great profits. They're running good teams. Everybody's happy. But the problem is you talk about the labor shortage and folks, retiring from the industry. Well, all of a sudden, you don't have 10 people with 25 years experience to run each one of those divisions. And so at some point, as a company, you're going to have to say, okay, we need to start taking the knowledge from from all this experience that we have and start to standardize our best practices, our processes, and so that now when somebody new joins the team, there's a playbook, there's a process, there's a way of doing things. And, I also think, that can be shared across multiple companies. I don't think it has to be proprietary to one particular construction company. I think that's why I love, going to conferences and watching folks that, in the real world might be competitors come together and say, hey, here's how we do it. Here's our best practice. And so, I think part of it is really just starting to set some standards across companies that, have been really, really successful without that, but they need to start looking forward to the future of a world where, we're going to see some folks leaving the industry that have really been holding the industry up on their back for 20, 30 years, and they might not be here, working in the industry pretty soon. They'll be out golfing or something. Yeah.
So you brought up future here. What's the topic of conversation going to be at Advancing Precon 2025?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. One thing I hope it is more interconnectivity between technology. One of the challenges I hear from a lot of folks in the industry is, there's some good tools out there, and I got 15 of them in pre-construction. So, well, that's hard. That's disconnected. That makes my life, well, maybe a little easier for this particular step in the process, but a lot harder in the aggregate as I'm actually thinking about managing all these different systems. And so I think, next year you'll probably see more really exciting announcements about super valuable and cool integrations between, different technology partners. I think you'll continue to see folks talking about data, of course, and some of the innovations that's happening with data, and actually, taking that next, year later step and how they're actually now seeing impact from being able to mine all those insights out of their data. Those are some of the trends, but I don't know. I'm going to show up and I'm going to find out. I can't wait.
There you go. So as we wrap up, a couple rapid fire questions for you. What does the phrase modeling the future, what does that kind of bring to mind for you?
Modeling the future?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I've spent a lot of time working with 3D BIM VDC. So when you say modeling the future, I immediately go towards, I think that we're going to continue to see more and more evolution of design models in BIM being integrated into construction. We've seen that for a long time, but I just think you're going to continue to see it because, again, there's so much data sitting inside of a model. And I would say too often we don't have, good, fully built out, high fidelity, high data rich models for construction teams. And I think some of the best, most successful projects do have that. And then what's great about it is that's an asset that lives on forever for that building. And so what I think you'll see is as it gets easier and easier to produce design models, you're gonna see more and more proliferation of design and BIM within construction, even within pre-construction. But I don't know, you're probably talking about something else when you said model in the future, but if you say models in front of me, that's the type of answer you're
No, I like it. I like these questions because they, everybody has a different vantage point on it. So I love seeing the variety. What does innovation mean to you?
Yeah, innovation means figuring out what the problems are and then collaborating on how we can solve them. Innovation isn't some shiny new piece of technology that's a huge buzzword. To me, it's sitting down with people who have felt the pain and experienced the pain of working in a particular industry and surfacing that to the table, and then having many people who are passionate about solving it collaborate together to come up with better and better solutions. That's innovation to me.
Yeah, I love that. Innovation has to solve a real world pain point, or else I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it looks cool on a slide, but is it actually help anybody? It's got to help somebody. It's got to deliver value.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do people find out more information and connect with you?
Yeah, go to Procore.com. That's the best way. That's the best way to find out more about me. I'm always at all the tech conferences, always hanging around, and I love talking with folks in the industry because what's cool about my job is literally what I do for a living is hang out with our customers, hang out with industry professionals and experts, listen to them, learn from them, collaborate with them, and envision what the future looks like. And so I don't know, anyone who's interested in doing that, I would love to hang out and chat and talk pre-construction, talk construction, and figure out how we can make this industry better.
Nice. Well, final question for you. If I could give you all construction power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing, what would you pick to innovate?
Yeah. I would want to see a rapid acceleration of 3D and design models being a standard in construction. I've built and worked on 2D plan solutions, and there's a lot of great ones out there, but I just love the opportunity that comes with data-rich design. But what's is really exciting to me is how do we make that a standard asset through the entire course of construction, because so much rich data gets collected during pre-construction but also during project execution. And so at the end of a job, we have the full history of what happened, what the costs were, but also what the building actually ended up being built to look like and what's behind the wall. And I think that provides enduring value for all of the buildings and assets around the world for the 50, 100 years after the construction project's done. And so that's something that my entire time in construction tech I've wanted to see go faster and move faster, and that's something that I get excited about.
Yeah, very nice. Well, thanks so much for taking the time and joining the show today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.